to Velavite. You've entered a space where the boundaries between the known and the supernatural dissolve. My goal is to take you on a journey through the most chilling, documented encounters from across the globe, from the fog-covered moors of the UK to the isolated backwoods of the United States. Yeah, we don't just tell stories, we explore the darkness that breathes beside us. Tonight, for our debut episode, we travel to the heart of Central Africa. We are exploring the terrifying reality of Juju, form of black magic so potent that even the mention of it strikes fear into the bravest hearts. This isn't folklore. This is the story of a man who saw too much and brought a shadow back home with him. Prepare yourself. This is the shadow of the Juju. David was a man who lived through his camera lens. As a seasoned photojournalist from London, he had covered war zones and natural disasters. He prided himself on his logic. In 2012, his work took him to the remote Kasai region of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He was there to capture the raw beauty of a rainforest, but the forest had its own eyes watching him. He was hosted by a local guide named Kalu, a man whose face was a map of scars and wisdom. For the first 2 days, everything was peaceful, but on the third evening, the air grew heavy, thick with a scent like ozone and rotting vegetation. The village, usually vibrant with music and children's laughter, went deathly silent as the sun dipped below the horizon. Kalu approached David's tent, his voice a frantic whisper. "Tonight, white man, you stay inside. The elders are settling a blood debt. The night walkers will be at the Great Baobab. If they see your soul, they will claim it. Do not even breathe too loudly." David nodded, but his journalistic instinct was a curse. By midnight, the silence of the jungle became deafening. No crickets, no birds, just a void. Then, a low vibration began. It wasn't a sound at first. It was a physical pressure in his chest. Thump, thump, thump. The drums began slow, rhythmic, and hauntingly deep. He couldn't resist. David grabbed his night vision binoculars and parted the tent's flap just an inch. About 50 yards away stood the Great Baobab, a tree so massive it looked like an ancient fortress. Under its twisted branches, a circle of fire flickered, but the flames were an unnatural shade of violet. The village elder stood in the center, his body painted in white ash. Surrounding him were 3 figures that defied the laws of physics. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, draped in heavy, obsidian robes that seemed to swallow the light around them. They didn't walk, they glided, their movements fluid like water. When David focused his binoculars, his blood turned to ice where their faces should have been. There was only a swirling, dark mist. The elder held up a small wooden doll, intricately carved with symbols that seemed to glow. He began to chant in a language that sounded like dry leaves scraping on a tombstone. As the chanting reached a fever pitch, the elder produced a rusted blade and made a shallow cut on the doll's chest. David gasped as he saw real, thick, crimson blood spray from the wooden chest of the doll, drenching the elder's hands. At that exact moment, a piercing scream echoed from a hut across the village, a scream of a man losing his life. Suddenly, the 3 robed figures stopped. In perfect unison, they turned their faceless heads toward David's tent. Panic, raw and primal, surged through him. He scrambled back, collapsing onto his sleeping bag. He tried to tell himself it was a hallucination, but then the smell hit him, the metallic scent of fresh blood and the sulfurous stench of a lightning strike. Then, the impossible happened. A hand, cold as the depths of the Arctic, pressed firmly against his spine. But it didn't come from outside the tent. The hand emerged from the floor of the tent itself, through the heavy canvas, as if the ground had turned to liquid. David tried to scream, but his throat was paralyzed. The hand stayed there for 5 seconds. 5 seconds. That felt like an eternity before, slowly sinking back into the earth. The drums stopped instantly. The jungle returned to its eerie silence. David stayed awake until dawn, clutching a small iron crucifix he hadn't touched in years. When the sun finally broke through the canopy, Kalu found him. He didn't ask what happened. He simply pointed at David's back. David stripped off his shirt. There, burned into his skin, was a perfect black handprint. It wasn't a bruise, it was a stain, as if his very flesh had been charred by an invisible fire. David left the Congo within hours, abandoning half of his equipment. He flew back to the grey, safe streets of London, hoping the distance would protect him. But Juju does not care for borders. For 6 months, that black handprint remained on his skin, refusing to fade despite every medical treatment. Even today, David lives in a state of perpetual vigil. He tells his story to very few. He says that on certain nights, when the moon is hidden, he can hear that rhythmic drumming vibrating through the walls of his apartment. And sometimes, in the reflection of his window, he sees a faceless shadow standing just behind him, waiting for the debt to be fully paid. In the West, we call it superstition. In Africa, they call it reality. And for David, it is a nightmare that never ends. Thank you for joining me for this first chapter of Veil of Night. The world is far stranger than we dare to admit, and some debts are written in blood that never dries. If this story chilled your bones, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. We will be back soon with more tales of the unexplained, the macabre, and the ancient. Our next story will take us to the abandoned asylums of New England. Until then, remember, not every shadow is cast by light. Keep your doors locked and sleep well if you can. Good night.